My Lord and my God. These are words of today's Holy Gospel, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Someone the other day made a very interesting comment. They said, we still have the grave and the bones of Abraham, and of Mohammed, and of Buddha, and of Confucius. But the tomb of Jesus is empty. The resurrection is a fact. Well, yes, that's true. We do have the bones of all these famous people who began different religions and made all sorts of religious claims, but the body of Jesus is not there, because the resurrection is a fact, and there is a lot of evidence that makes it very difficult to ignore the fact of the resurrection. Consider this. The tomb of Jesus is empty. A corpse is never produced to disprove the claim of resurrection. Now picture this, mind you. The apostles were out preaching the resurrection and making converts by the thousands. The high priests arrest the apostles. They demand that the apostles stop talking about that man and about the resurrection. And they even put them in jail and have them scourged. But the apostles don't stop. They could have stopped Christianity right there. They could have nipped it in the bud. All they had to do was find the body. They never did, because there was no body. The tomb of Jesus was empty. Second, we have to consider the change in the character of the apostles before and after the resurrection. You know, as you read the Gospels, you have to think, what in the world was Jesus thinking about when he chose those 12 men? Because really, they weren't the brightest picture lights in the rack. If you think about it. I mean, they were confused, they were cowards, they were very selfish and self-centered. And, you know, they weren't exactly the kind of people that you would entrust with this great mission to preach the gospel. But after the resurrection, they seemed to have changed. They had confidence. They spoke out with great courage. And they withstood all sorts of torture and difficulties because they saw the resurrection. They knew it was true. They saw Jesus resurrected. Third, we have to consider the fact that there are too many eyewitnesses of the resurrection of Jesus recorded at different times and different places to claim that they were mistaken, that they were just sentimental, that they were hysterical or hallucinating. Hundreds saw Jesus alive. At one point, 500 people are recorded as seeing Jesus. Many saw him independently, individually. They touched him. They ate with him. They talked to him. They listened to him for hours at a time. These witnesses can't be discounted. Someone could have said, oh, how can you say that? There's the body. They never did. They couldn't. All of these people were witnesses. Fourth, we have to consider the fact, and I mentioned this the other day, the fact that there is more documentary evidence and eyewitness accounts for Jesus and his resurrection than we have of any other ancient historical event or individual. That fact always takes me by surprise. We have more eyewitness documentation for Jesus and his resurrection than we have for anything to do with Julius Caesar, Alexander the Great, or Cleopatra, or just to name a few. That's an amazing fact. More eyewitness documentation of Jesus than we have of Julius Caesar. That's amazing. And lastly, We know as historical fact that Jesus lived and that he died. And if we allow ourselves to be aware of the great quantity and quality of documentary and archaeological evidence available, and if we are intellectually and morally honest, we have no choice but to admit that the resurrection is true and real. And once we open our minds and hearts to Jesus, we have a future, an eternal future. Once we accept Jesus and his resurrection, we have it all. We have a sure and true path through life. We have the power of his peace. We understand total love, total forgiveness. We walk in strength and power here and now, and in the end, we have eternal life. The resurrection is the mercy of God. That is his great mercy for us. When St. Faustina Kowalska saw the apparition of Jesus, he asked that she have a portrait painted of him, just as you see it here. That image is as Jesus appeared to the apostles on that first day in the darkened and locked room. And he asked St. Faustina to have a signature signed at the bottom of the picture. That was an unusual way to phrase it. He wanted it signed with the words, "Jesus, I trust in thee. Jesu ufam Tobie." Those words to impress upon us the trust that we can put in his resurrection, the faith that we can put in his resurrection, the mercy that we have in his resurrection. Because of the fact of his resurrection, you and I have eternal life. Because of the fact of his resurrection, you and I do not end at the grave. We have the promise of eternal life based on an individual who has been there and come back. We can put our trust in Jesus, in his mercy, and know that we have eternal life. When we look at the picture of the divine mercy, the rays of light coming down towards us, they represent a number of things. They represent the last blood and water shed for our mercy. But they also represent eternity, life, grace, blessing, all of God's love embracing us for eternity. That is the mercy of God. It's based